Welcome in, everybody. Listen, we are in for such a treat today as we move into another riveting, transformative discussion here on the Global Leaders Roundtable podcast. Listen, this is the Fireside Chat edition, and I'm sure it's going to be nothing less than fiery as we embark upon this necessary conversation for these next few moments. But first, before we do that, let me formally welcome you to the channel and to another edition of the Global Leaders Roundtable, where voices rise, leaders converge, and kingdom movements are born. I'm your host, Kenyon R. Dudley, global leadership strategist, keynote speaker, and founder of this great and growing global platform built to activate purpose and propel destiny. This space is for the bold. This space that we're holding in the digital world is for the healed and the healing, because I believe that breakthrough requires more than just strategy. It requires soul work. It requires conversations that allow you as a leader in your community, in your field of influence, your industry. It allows you to be effective and it allows you to be great, just how God created you to be. For those of you who are just getting an opportunity to meet me, thank you so much for joining in this ecosystem of global kingdom leaders coming together and edifying one another in word and in discussion, and of course in action as well. There's so many things that we have planned that we will be doing even outside of this vacuum of discussion here at the virtual roundtable. So you need to stick with us. We are evolving this platform into something amazing. So I want to make sure that you stick with us. Listen, my number one mission in life is to say something that's going to transform somebody's life. It's going to help transcend their thinking, their thought process, their perspective on life. It's to introduce them to God, and in hopes of introducing them to their purpose that is found in God. And so we do that through these conversations. Today is not going to be any different. I believe that you're going to be introduced to another layer, another level of yourself through this conversation. But before we jump into it, you know how we do it. We do our announcements at the beginning because the conversations get so well and deep that we don't want to break the conversations when we enter into them. So for those of you, really quick, if you want to be a part of this Global Leaders Roundtable conversation, listen, you can go and apply today to be a part of this platform. Now, we have over 200 people that are on the wait list, that wants to be a part of this podcast. I will be honest, not everybody is being chosen. We are literally being intentional with who we bring to the platform. But if you believe that you have a strategy, an idea, a big idea, a journey for leadership that is worth sharing to our global community, why don't you go now to bit.ly/TGLR podcast and apply today to be on the Global Leaders Roundtable podcast. And then lastly, guys, I'm super excited about what's coming up. September 20th through the 21st of this year, we are having the Global Leaders Virtual Summit. We're going to be focusing on global kingdom leadership. And we have over 60 kingdom global speakers from around the world who will be joining us to share their main idea, their big idea, their strategies, to share how they are pushing forward and being most effective in their fields and in their industry. We have people from government. We have people from the medical field. We have individuals from entertainment. We have folks from ministry all over. And I'm super excited to invite you to be a part of the discussion. And so if you want to just attend, go to that link that's on the actual page right there in front of you. Or if you want to be a speaker, you're more than welcome to go and apply today on that same site. Go to bit.ly/TGLR virtual summit now, and you can be a part of such a global, a dynamic movement. All right. So I'm super excited about this conversation. Are you ready? Are you ready to dive deep into what we're getting ready to talk about today? I'm going to introduce today's guest. She is a prophetic force, a global voice in emotional healing, self leadership, and mental health advocacy. Ambassador Lynn Hill is a 17-time global award winning speaker, author, poet, and mental health practitioner who turned her pain into power by using divine purpose as the bridge. She's not just a speaker, guys, she's a truth teller, a soul surgeon. I love this, and a woman of great depth. From South Africa to stages around the world, Lynn teaches the difference between borrowed power and authentic power, and is a force, a fierce force for the destigmatization of mental health. Ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome to the virtual roundtable my new friend, all the way from South Africa, dear sister, Ambassador Lynn Hill. Thank you so much,
Wow.
Ambassador, for being here.
What an absolute honor and an absolute privilege, Kenyon, to be hosted by Global Leaders Roundtable. Certainly a moment, a definitive moment in time for me. So thank
Yes.
you. Bless you.
Yes, bless you. I'm super excited, and as I stated before, and glad that you said yes when we reached out and invited you to the platform. Um, and this discussion that we're going to have, I think, is most important in today's time, even as it relates specifically to leaders around the world, Christian leaders, believing leaders. And so today, to the viewers, I just want to introduce what we're talking about. We're talking about mastering the inner world, self leadership beyond trauma, pain, and fear. And I think this is, like I said, impactful, important for us to have this discussion. And so, thank you for being here to help lead this discussion, Ambassador Lynn. Why don't you officially introduce yourself to our viewers? Let them know which part of the world you're in South Africa, and also what is it that God has you focusing on right now?
Okay. So I am a daughter of a mighty king, which makes royalty run through my veins. None of what you're going to be experiencing tonight is of me, is of the flesh, it is of the spirit. And so I simply am a obedient vessel showing up. I am an absolutely passionate, purpose driven, resilient woman who refused not only to give up, but I refused to have the glory that was placed on the inside of me compromised in any way.
Yes.
And I survived. I survived the near death experience to
Wow.
live, to not only live to tell my story, but to also live to write my story.
Yes.
And I am just so grateful. And it's moments like these that have me say that the pain I once endured, I now celebrate, Kenyon.
Yes, wow. Near death experience. Oh my goodness. If you don't mind, let's kind of share your story a little bit. What happened, throughout your life that brought you to such a place of yieldedness, that brought you to such a place of admiration for God, and giving Him your life to use?
Wow. So the journey, the life changing event that I believe informed my inspirational trajectory and my studying psychology was embedded in a sexual brutalization, a
Wow.
rape that was so brutal. I was raped by someone who belonged to my church.
Wow.
It was so brutal that the police thought a train had ridden over my face.
Wow.
I had been reduced to a pleading piece of pulverized pulp,
Mm,
bleeding from every hole in my body, and eventually
mm,
bleeding so much and that I lost consciousness.
mm.
And I remember just resigning because my body could not handle any more of the torture and pain.
Yes.
And I resigned and I crossed over. I touched the other side. And as I was leaving, just leaving my body,
Yes.
I do remember saying to myself, I have only two regrets. And that those two regrets would be that I didn't get to say goodbye to my grandparents
Mm,
and I didn't get to say goodbye to my parents.
mhm.
But the light drew me and I crossed over and I touched the other side.
Wow.
And with my big toe of my right foot, the tip of it touched the other side. And
Wow.
the next moment, I was retracted at a speed. And above me, as I opened my eyes, I was lying in my blood. And as I opened my eyes, above me stood the hugest angel. And I remember taking my blood-stained hand and tugging its wing. And today I joke, I say, sure, if I had to tug harder, I would have had the evidence. I do know it was Archangel Michael. That I am
Wow.
absolutely convinced of today. But in that moment of the tugging and the touching of the wing, I regained supernatural strength. I was 15. I had just been beaten um, and and I started to negotiate. I started to negotiate for my life. I started to tell him that I would not tell anybody. And that was just, I believe it was God's protective hand over my life. And that moment brought to life that whatever the enemy plans for evil,
Mhm.
God certainly turns it not only into good, but into great. And, my story is no longer about a brand. My story is now for the sole purposes of kingdom glory.
Yes. Wow. What an amazing story. And you never know what someone has come through and overcome until you sit to hear their story. And I know sexual brutality and assault and all of that all too well. It has happened to many people in my family, including my wife. And I know the toll that it takes on you even after the experience. Before we go to that moment, of those moments of after it happened, the journey, let's stop for a moment, and really dig a little deeper into this supernatural experience that you had. I too, at 5 years old, and I tell this story not to many people because they would never understand it, but I understand what you're saying, Ambassador Lynn, when you state that you saw the other side and you touched it with your toe. I too, at 5 years old, had a supernatural encounter with God. And it is actually during the moment where I believe I received my call to be a part of his mouthpiece and to speak, around the world about his glory and his power. But what I experienced that day for me, and I just want to follow this up with a question for you. What I experienced that day for me was total disconnection from the natural realm. Um, so, were you in that moment? Were you even cognizant or aware of the natural world at all? Or was it a total spiritual experience? You had come out of your body in that moment.
Yeah, it was definitely a total spiritual experience,
Mm-hmm.
that the departing the natural, and was certainly linked to my regret, because I did not know that I would lose consciousness.
Right.
And so that regret of not saying goodbye to my grandparents and my parents, that was happening as I was walking down the tunnel of light. It
Yes.
felt like I was running towards the light.
Yes.
So it was an out of body experience, and it was supernatural.
Yeah.
And for God to have sent an angel to the very toilet in
Mm-hmm.
which I had been tortured and demolished, to protect me from death, i.e., to save my life,
Yes.
meant that he had placed a value on my life. And if he had placed a value on my life had to have had purpose.
Yes. Indeed. And after that moment, is that was that the rationalization in your mind that if he saved me, if God sent an angel to save me, then there must be purpose in my life? Or did you come to that revelation later on as you journeyed through your healing?
I think, Kenyon, what happened was that supernatural, as I go further into my story and touch on the principles I lived before I knew that they existed, I
Hmm.
believe that was God's protective hand upon my life
Yes.
and upon my calling. Because, when I was writing my book, it was how did a 15-year-old know that she needed to find the highest purpose in her deepest pain?
Right.
How did a 15-year-old know about reclamation and disassociation in order to derive its self-definition? And it was only when I wrote my first book that I realized, but this was God. This
Hmm.
could only be God, because I was incapable. Remember, I'd just come out of something that felt like a nightmare.
Yes.
And um, looking at myself in the mirror 72 hours later, I could not see myself, but I could feel, because my eyes had been beaten shut.
Wow.
And I remember forcing my eyes open, and I groveled from my bed to the mirror, and I forced my eyes open. And what stared back at me was a horror mask from a horror movie.
Yeah.
But that again supernaturally marked the beginning of my realizing, because when I disassociated with the mask, it was, this is not who I am.
Hmm.
I am not the mask. And in that moment of disassociation, again, at a supernatural level for a 15-year-old that had just been brutalized and tortured 72 hours prior to that, for me to say, this is not who I am. I
Hmm.
mean, the implied meaning came after, and the implied meaning was that I would not be defined by what was looking and staring back at me in the mirror.
Yes, indeed. So this entire moment became your bridge into your divine purpose, the revelation of that, and even the living that out. This moment,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. When I came out of sedation, I had also heard that allegedly, I was not the first girl that he had raped.
Wow.
And again, as that 15-year-old saying, but he will be the last. And so I took it upon myself, obviously with the strength of God and the supernatural influence of the Holy Spirit, to say, I will speak the
Yeah.
truth. I will defend my truth. If I was allegedly the fourth or fifth girl, I would ensure that I be the last.
Right.
And, we were speaking 1983 here.
Wow.
when women of color never ever, if you were raped as a white woman, there was greater value placed on your life than that of a woman of color. And here I was, not a woman of color, I was a teenager of color,
Mm-hmm.
and spared to defend my truth, but also to again supernaturally and prophetically mark the beginning of a journey,
Right.
which would be one of advocacy, which would be one that speaks for the voiceless.
Yes, yes. And I think what you are doing, I have had an opportunity to kind of watch and see what you're doing, and it's a phenomenal work that you're doing. I could feel your power that comes through when you're writing on your Facebook page or whatnot. And so, talking about that, finding the strength and the power through Christ and through God in order to have a voice, to speak up for the voiceless. How would you encourage others to tap into that same power? Because some people are feeling powerless with what has happened to them. Maybe it's not a rape, but it may be some other type of injustice. Um, is it that the power of God just came upon you? Um, and that's something that can happen for them too? Or is it something that you pray for, that you ask for? How does one get authentic power from God?
We receive, as the word says, that for which we ask.
Mm,
And the willingness to be open to receive, the willingness to cooperate with God. And again, this was supernatural because remember, I was only 15. So, where was all of this coming from? I hadn't yet studied psychology, I
right.
hadn't yet. Done a few things. Where was all of this coming from? And it could only be of God in order to now not only protect my life, but to protect my purpose.
Yes.
And we are having this conversation today because he did so, not just one rape later, but two rapes later.
Wow.
And so for those who are saying, how do I do this? We have to ask for his help
Yes.
so that we are able to access it and receive it, because whatever we ask for, it will be given unto us.
Yes.
And I asked for help. I obviously knew I could not do it on my own. But
Hmm.
what happened in the moment of the real angel, knowing that angels are sent from above, the real ones, the real deal ones,
Yes.
it was not just the angel that became real. God became real in my life through the angel that
Mm,
was sent. And very often I'm asked, why did you live life? How could you live life not being angry at the church
right.
as a body of Christ?
Hmm.
And that is really simple because by that time I already knew that God was not to be found in a building, that he was to be found in our hearts.
Right. You had already had
So
that revelation.
yeah. So who was I to hold him ransom for what had gone down in my life if he had proven himself minutes after I crossed down the tunnel and over that he proved himself that he was real.
Yes. Yes. I love that. Let's turn the dial just for a moment. So now you are years later, you are an ambassador, a global speaker. You are well trained in psychology and all of these things. What was that moment that made you jump over into psychology and that type of work that you're doing today? Um, did you wake up one day and say, you know what? Because of my story and the things that I've come through, I now want to help others? or was it something that you saw other people struggling with and you said, no, I'm going to go and get trained in psychology and trained in these areas so that I could be of help? What was it that brought you into where you are now?
So it was incremental, and you're so right. It started with psychology.
Yeah.
That was actually the first step that would put me on a trajectory as a healer.
Hmm.
But at that point in time, I was 17 years old, 16 turning 17, and I was going through severe post-traumatic stress disorder. So
Okay.
for one whole year, I shut it out and I channeled all of my energy. And I was already a conscientious student, but I just became more conscientious. It was deflection, it was denial, it was
Right.
repression, it was all of those defense mechanisms.
Right.
And 1 year later, PTSD hit me like a tsunami, and I needed therapy. And I remember every Friday afternoon for an entire year, on a Friday afternoon, sitting in therapy. And the therapist would say to me, Kerry would say to me, I understand. You must be feeling this way, and I understand. And it became so nerve-wracking and irritating to me on the other side, sitting on the other side, sitting opposite her, thinking, you don't understand. You cannot understand. Only someone who has gone through this
Yeah.
will be able to understand. And that was the markings of, I want to help others.
Wow.
But as a result of this trauma, I will then be sitting with a level of empathy that no textbook can actually deliver to you.
Right.
And I guess that makes me real as a speaker, as a counselor, not saying other counselors are not real, but
Sure.
real in terms of the heart to heart and soul to soul connection. I don't only counsel trauma victims. However, it makes it real, and self-disclosure creates miraculous endings in therapy as well.
I love that self-disclosure makes miraculous endings. You're right. You're so right because the person that's on the other end who's suffering for whatever reason needs to hear a lot of times that the person who is stretching out their hand understands the weight of what they're going through. It just helps a person see a model of what they can be when they heal and they come through. It makes a person, I don't know what it is, but I think it makes uh, it's human nature to see someone else overcoming and then find some type of strength within to want to overcome yourself.
Absolutely. Spot on, Kenyon. That
So,
is spot on.
yeah. Um, you teach a lot about self leadership, and
I,
that's a part of your
I
work.
actually call it my reason for living, my
I love
reason
it.
for not having died.
Yes.
It's my calling. It is
Okay.
an integral part of my divine purpose.
Hmm. Talk to me about that. What does it mean? What does self leadership and all of that really look like from your lens?
Okay, so from my lens and linked to my story,
Yeah.
and again defined it organically for myself before I knew the principles existed. So
Yes.
for me, self leadership, Kenyon, is the absolute conscious pursuit, the conscious choice
Hmm.
to want to become the greatest version of who you were born to become,
Hmm. Right.
despite despite the trauma, despite the disappointments, despite the episodes of betrayal, despite all of those things that can sometimes sabotage our destiny. And so self leadership is really owning the right that I can become the greatest person, that I have the ability to rise above every single challenge that life throws at me, because I actually can do all things through Christ who strengthens me.
Yeah.
Self leadership is defying limitation. Self leadership is the choice to not succumb to the temptation of reactivity and entitlement and fear and mediocrity, very importantly, mediocrity, because when you are pursuing self leadership, you are pursuing excellence. And so that is, I guess, my take on self leadership: the ability to self direct your life, the ability to transcend, the ability to transform and to
Hmm.
redefine as many times as we recognize stagnation or mediocrity. And this is the difference between the butterfly and us.
Yeah.
You know, that the butterfly gets to transform only once it is able to change its identity. But we have the capacity, the power, and the authority to transform as many times as we recognize stagnation, mediocrity, entitlement, unconscious living, unconscious leading. And then the biblical component, so that was the secular bit, the biblical one, and this is the first time I'm actually sharing it, so thank you for this moment.
Absolutely.
That what self-mastery and self-leadership translates into from a biblical perspective is really consciously adopting the character of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
It is emulating consciously the heart of Christ. It is allowing the fruits of the Holy Spirit to reach their fullest expression in any given and single context in such a way that you are distinguished not by your words,
Hmm.
but by your deeds and your attitude. And that linked to leadership and self leadership would certainly set the tone for the need or the value in wanting others or having others want to follow you, the desire to follow you, not because you carry a title, but the desire to follow you, the desire to ascribe to be like you, based on admirable qualities that is only found in Christ.
Wow. It's you share this with such power. You share this with such grace. You share this with such passion. I could literally feel it emulating and coming through the screen. Um, that you believe what you are saying, and I believe it. I know it to be true that when you set your mind to adopt, I'll use your terminology, to adopt the characteristics of Christ and the characteristics of the kingdom of God. When you make that conscious effort and conscious choice each day, you'll find out something that is a mystery. You'll find out that there is no limitation to the human spirit.
Which is why God gave my company's name is Limitless by
Mm,
Lynn Hill, and that name came straight from God. But it is exactly that, that there are no limitations, that
yeah,
we have inherited, we've been made in the likeness and image of a God that has
yes,
no limits. And so the conscious defiance of limitation is actually spiritual.
Mm. The
It is
conscious.
faith-based.
Let's say that again. I want to make sure that our viewers heard what you just said. The conscious defiance.
So the conscious defiance of limitation is actually a spiritual attribute because by converse, it is faith-based.
Yes, yes, indeed, it is faith.
Limitation is
It's
fear-based.
yeah,
Limitlessness is faith-based.
yes. So limitations is fear based, and limitless is faith based.
Yeah,
It takes just as much faith as it does fear to move forward and to forge ahead and to break barriers and to transcend as it would to have fear enough to stay where you are and to be
absolutely.
limited in your mind, your thinking, your and even in your body.
Absolutely.
How do you what's the type of work that you're doing now with people to teach this revelation? Is it just through counseling, or is there other work that God has you doing to walk people into this revelation?
Absolutely. So it would definitely be through personal mastery training, which is a workshop format. Obviously, the speaking, and I am planning to also be doing it as an online course for the
Yeah,
very purpose that others are able to access it, even if they are not inside my geographical area.
I love this. So ladies and gentlemen, as you are listening in, you already know, get yourself ready to connect with Ambassador Lynn and the work that she's doing, because I believe this is more than just a moment that we're having, but I think this is a Kairos opportunity and moment for those who are watching to be able to answer the call to go beyond what culture has placed as a limitation, or to go beyond what their previous or past struggle or situation has created for them as a mental or spiritual or even physical prison. This is a moment that they can transcend and move beyond those limitations. Let me ask this question of you, Ambassador Lynn. Um, I thought it interesting to ask you this because of your work in both the faith world and being a mental health practitioner. So, how do you reconcile the therapy and the theology? How do you reconcile the counseling and the Christ?
So, this is what I've done. I have taken the best parts, the parts of therapy and counseling that resonates very, very deeply with me. I
Right.
have selected those aspects, and the approach is definitely a people-centered approach. The approach is definitely a present approach and not the past that plays a deterministic role in our lives. And I believe the past does influence us, but it certainly does not determine who we become. And whatever we feed grows. So if we are constantly feeding our past, the past is going to override the present, and then our history becomes more insignificantly significant than our destiny, because I need to be fully present. I need to be occupying my now moments fully in order to be building the future and the destiny that God has ordained upon my life. And so, what I've done is I've taken the parts that resonate deeply, and obviously, not all of my clients are also Christian.
Of course,
And
of course.
so, again, for me, the ministry is the presence and the quality of my character.
Yes.
And that is the differentiator. That is our first, as Christians, that is our first step
Yeah.
of ministry, when we are allowed the opportunity to shine our light in dark places. And that
Absolutely.
is the God light.
I believe that. I totally agree. I totally agree. And so with the work that you're doing, it's a phenomenal work. I could discern that. Um, you're teaching people how to reclaim their inner authority after trauma and fear and all of these things that have boxed them in. Uh, if you had to step on a stage in front of a group of people that was in an arena, 100,000 people in an arena, and they said, Ambassador Lynn, we need you to share with them one step that would move them closer to living limitless. What would you say when you step on that stage? What would God have you speak to that audience of 100,000?
I would say that captivity is self-imposed,
Mm,
that captivity is not always situational as we are led to believe,
yes.
that captivity is basically a mindset,
Mm,
and that we cannot hope and aspire and want to gain results based, for freedom and peace and bliss in our lives. We cannot um, experience our fullest potential and aspire to be the ultimate versions of who God destined us to be in a state of captivity. And
mhm,
so for me, the foundation of the mastery journey, the self-leadership journey is mindset.
mhm.
And
Wow.
it's encapsulated in one of my quotations. And the quotation itself speaks to transformative thinking. And the quotation reads something like this: it takes the same amount of soil to dig a grave than it does to plant a garden.
Mm,
It was when I could have been buried that I chose to be planted. And we all have this choice to choose how anything affects us. And
mhm.
I chose power over pain and passion over pity.
You have the choice. You have the
Absolutely.
choice. We have the choice. I am blown away at your depth and your light and your wisdom, the peace that comes and exudes from you, even through the screen. I'm so grateful for this conversation. You have a piece of work that you wanted to share with us. Do you have that with you? The piece of poem that you had?
Yeah, I have it with me. It's
Yeah.
here.
Please share it. Pour out of your heart with us in these last few moments. Why don't you share the poem?
The poem was written in severe PTSD after a second rape, which happened while I was on a business trip in Johannesburg only 7 years ago. And it's called Hear Her Roar. And so it wasn't just about the reclamation of voice, it was about the transmutation of voice into a roar. And this time, God told me that it would be a global roar. And so, to Global Leaders Roundtable, thank you for this opportunity of
Yeah,
perfect alignment.
absolutely.
And it goes like this: Hear her roar. She may have silently screamed when pain became her second name. She may have swallowed rivers of tears, pretending not to drown. She may even have contemplated death when she felt there was no reason to keep on keeping on. But now, hear her roar as she shouts this to the world. While pain became my second name, it was my gateway to victory all the same. And the rivers of tears in which I thought I'd nearly drowned, well, that's now become my riverbed on which my mermaid treasures can now be found. And as for death, death died its bloody death when my divine purpose became my only breath. And now And now my roar is the tender, compassionate, inspiring whispers. I feed my brothers and sisters so that their own suffering will not starve them. And now my roar is my voice, through which I channel those who have been devoiced by systems and perplexities beyond their own control. And now my roar is the half moon that shines across my face as I smile at the beauty of living a purposeful, triumphant life. And now my roar is the license I choose to give myself to unconditionally love myself, because self love now magnifies my presence in this world. And now my roar is my laughter that tumbles from deep within my soul, bouncing between light and love and the realization that I was never broken but always whole. And now my roar is my self made oasis, my fulfilled dreams, birthed in a desert in which I did not ask to be birthed in, get lost in, or get raped in twice. And now my roar is my uncompromised, unapologetic authenticity. And now my roar is the true celebration of my precious soul's sacredity. Thank you.
Whew. Hmm. Wow. I'm just taking a moment to breathe that in. And now my roar. I love that, Ambassador Lynn. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I'm sure that I speak on behalf of the viewers and listeners that this moment has set ablaze a fire in some who thought they didn't have a flame, and has ignited all the more passion and fire in those who felt their fire was waning. To see your strength, to hear your strength, and to know all that God is doing through you in both the secular world and um, the church has been my greatest. It's been my greatest joy to watch today. Thank you for your wisdom. I just
And
I encourage people to connect with Ambassador Lynn, Lynn Hill. Obviously, there is a power that's coming from her that you all need to be connected to. It comes from God.
it comes from God through
Yeah,
her. So
yeah,
I was going to correct that,
yeah.
Kenyon, also, just that it's none of me. It's
No,
all of him. It's
all of
all
him.
of him. It is his works, his mercy, his grace,
Yeah,
um, that that flows through me.
yeah,
And I am simply a vessel through
yeah.
whom he works.
And for that, that is the reason why I encourage those to follow and to connect with you, because you are very aware of this. Many leaders um, aren't aware of where their help and where their strength comes from. I am one of the ones like you that know that without him, I am nothing. I
Nothing.
cannot do anything that I do or will do, nor do I want to go and do it without him. Um, that is that is a direct setup for disaster if we do. Um,
Absolutely. Disaster and insanity.
and insanity. Yes, 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 yes. Ambassador Lynn, share with our viewers how they can stay connected with you, please.
so they could connect with me. I am now on TikTok.
Yes.
And yeah, TikTok, one of my major achievements for 2025. I think it's only about a month old, my TikTok account. So it is Limitless, at Limitless by Lynn Hill on TikTok. My website is www at limitlessbylynnhill.com. No, www.limitlessbylynnhill.com. I am available on LinkedIn, and I think the two of us met via Facebook.
Yes.
So, Ambassador Lynn, the AMB stands for Ambassador and not Amber, because I have been now called Amber Lynn,
Oh my God.
Amber Lynn Hill. So, thank you for not having called me Amber this evening,
Yes.
Kenyon.
No.
Much
You're so welcome.
appreciated.
Well,
Yeah.
Kenyon, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for your time and your passion and your wisdom that comes from God. And thank you for your story, for sharing it so powerfully. I want you to hang tight. I'm going to wrap up today's show, and then I'll come speak with you, Ambassador Lynn, in just a few moments. Ladies and gentlemen, Ambassador Lynn Hill, thank you so much, Ambassador. Uh, People of God, leaders all over the world, it is my prayer that you have been touched in such a beautiful way, even as I have been. I mean, it's taken me a minute to wrap my brain around the spiritual context and implications of which is what is happening right now by the Spirit of God. I'm super excited that we got an opportunity, Ambassador Lynn Hill and I, to align and to come and to share her story, to share the work that God has her doing. And not only that, for you to be able to see that it is possible to live beyond trauma, it is possible to live beyond pain. And in fact, those things are but a bridge that brings you over into the power of God for the purpose that He has for your life. Ambassador Lynn, thank you again for your honesty, your authority, and your anointing. You reminded us today that real leadership begins with inner alignment, that the battlefield is within, and so is the breakthrough. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been my great pleasure to bring this conversation to you from the Global Leaders Roundtable. I'm your host, Kenyon R. Dudley, and this is the Global Leaders Roundtable, where voices rise, leaders converge, and kingdom movements are born. Until next time, master your inner world, lead from the truth of God, and walk in His power.